Thank you to all my patrons for supporting my videos.
What you're looking at is the walk of a man who just lost everything.
This video is going to cover quite a lot of stuff. We'll be looking at differences between American, British and Australian accents. I'll discuss a feature that American actors often get wrong when they try to do a British accent. We'll see when and why English and Australian speakers say things like law and order. And we'll find that unlike this linking r, the so-called linking y and w just don't exist. And we'll also see how dictionaries misrepresent American, British and Australian English, and how this directly causes wrong thinking and wrong teaching. Let's start by telling the time. Look at these three phrases. English speakers around the world pronounce these quite similarly, but not identically. In general American accents, the three phrases are rhythmically similar to each other: 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. But in England, in my kind of accent, there's a rhythmic difference between the first two and the third, which takes markedly longer to say. You can hear this if I repeat the phrases on a loop. For example, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock. You might think I'm making that difference deliberately, but it can be measured from regular real speech. I recorded North American and Southern British speakers saying 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in normal running speech in YouTube videos. 15 Americans, 15 Brits. Then I measured the length of the and ora portions.
Hi Jeff, Matt Parker here. I plotted the data you sent me. It's just in Excel. This is not the best visualization ever. You can see the blue here. This is the USA 2 o'clock, very similar to the UK. The averages of these are near identical, as are their standard deviations, out of curiosity. Whereas the USA saying 4 o'clock, you can see this is a higher average, but much higher. For the UK people saying 4 o'clock, you can see that yellow distribution at the back there is clearly very different, with a spike way over here at 225 milliseconds compared to all the others. But these two, near identical.
Note that these facts are not what various resources lead us to expect. The two most influential pronouncing dictionaries show the same long vowels in both accents, and since American 4 has the additional r sound that 2 and 3 lack, we might expect it to be significantly longer, which it isn't. And many resources tell us that in British English, the three phrases should have exactly the same rhythm, because we have these three long vowels, supposedly, oo, e, or followed in each case, supposedly, by an additional sound that links to a following vowel, linking w in 2 o'clock, linking y in 3 o'clock, and linking r in 4 o'clock. You can find this claim all over the place in videos, books, even academic articles. But I'm afraid it's nonsense. Yes, speakers in England and Australia have a long vowel in 4, though this symbol would probably be more accurate. And yes, the same speakers generally separate this long vowel from a following vowel by inserting a r sound. And yes, native speakers can hear and feel a y sound in 3 o'clock and a w sound in 2 o'clock. But nobody inserts these sounds after 2 and 3. As I explained in my long video on why these symbols are all wrong, linguists have pointed out since at least the 19th century that the vowels e and oo themselves end in glides. This is the great phonetician Henry Sweet, who is said to have taught Europe phonetics. He called e and oo consonantal diphthongs, and here, from my other video, are some of his transcriptions. This, these special attributes, human beings, doing his best to keep off, and prove that he hadn't, and it was a ruined chapel. I give lots of evidence to support this in my other video, but here are a couple of quick examples. Here's the word pea from the Cambridge Dictionary.
P.
Now if, as the dictionary tells us, this is pea, then if you play it backwards, it should sound like eep, right? But if the vowel is Henry Sweet's diphthong, like this, and we play it backwards, we'd expect yip, and guess what?
Yippee. Yippee. Yippee.
Now let's turn to the oo vowel, as in to. As I showed in my longer video, the familiar dictionary transcriptions tell us that the word blue contains a pure vowel like Southern British blur, not a diphthong, a changing vowel like blow.
Blur, blue, blow.
But the reality is that blue contains not a static vowel like blur, but just the same kind of changing quality as blow.
When one word ends in an oo sound, an oo, oo, ooh, 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 ooh.
So the w in 2 o'clock and the y in 3 o'clock are just on the end of the words 2 and 3. In Australia, this is specifically the form of the oo vowel that you get before another vowel, as in o'clock. If you check out my last video, you'll see that the Australian o vowel varies in just the same way. So in England and Australia, 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock are shorter than 4 o'clock, which has a long vowel and then an inserted r sound. But in general American, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock are rhythmically similar because all three phrases have just a vowel followed by a glide. And crucially, the vowel in General American 4 is not itself a long vowel. General American just doesn't have a set of short vowels and a set of long vowels the way that the English and the Aussies do. To demonstrate this, take a couple of words like gather and father. For me, the stressed vowel of gather is short, while the stressed vowel of father is long. Listen to the rhythm. Gather, 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 father, 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 father. But in General American, the length is roughly the same. American gather is longer than mine, and American father is shorter than mine. Gather, 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 father, 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 father. For comparison, here again are mine. Gather, 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 father, 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 father. These length distinctions are something that Americans may not always get right when they aim at a British accent like RP. For example, Keanu Reeves here uses a final vowel in understand that's too long.
Doctor, you must understand. Understand.
And Winona Ryder here uses a short vowel in thoughts when it should be long.
I begin to understand the nature of my feelings for my strange friend, who was always in my thoughts. My thoughts.
It seems to me that it's more often these Southern British long vowels that American actors could make a bit longer. Here's that word father, but with the rhythm of gather.
I don't have a father, actually. I don't have a father, actually.
This word sounds perhaps too much like short British walk.
What you're looking at is the walk of a man who just lost everything.
When of course the intended word is long walk.
The walk of a man who just lost everything.
Natalie Portman here removes the r from the end of the word hair, but leaves behind only a short vowel.
You cut my hair. My hair.
And here the vowel of part is no longer than the vowel of not.
As if I have a part to play in a story that is not known to me. Part, not.
And also there's no long vowel in story.
In a story that is not known to me. Story.
In my kind of accent, that word story has a long vowel and then the consonant r, just as in 4 o'clock. Now in General American accents, the exact identity of the vowel in story and for is open to some debate, but what it isn't for most American speakers is a long vowel followed by a r. Although that's exactly what the Cambridge, Longman and Oxford Advanced Learners dictionaries all say. Listen to these audio clips and you should be able to hear that the American story is shorter than the British story.
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 And Australia's best known dictionary, the Macquarie, does exactly the opposite. It tells us that Australian English doesn't have any vowel length distinctions when it does. Let me back this up with numbers and pictures. I measured the word story in normal utterances by American speakers, English folk and Australians, 30 each this time.
Story. Story.
Specifically, I measured the time from the start of the first vowel to the midpoint of the r. The averages were shorter for the Americans than for the English and the Aussies, and when I ran the stats, there was a significant difference between the Americans and the English, and a highly significant difference between the Americans and the Australians. Remember, that's Australians long and Americans not long, the opposite of what we saw in the dictionaries. And of course, there was no significant difference at all between the English and the Aussies.
British? I thought you were Australian.
Here are spectrograms of 2 eggs and 4 eggs, pronounced by the American and British voices in Google Translate.
2 eggs, 2 eggs, 4 eggs, 4 eggs.
I chose them to reduce differences like speaking style and tempo as much as possible, and they're pretty naturalistic. 2 eggs looks quite similar in the 2 accents. This dipping black bar, or formant, technical name F2, changes throughout the vowel, gliding into the w portion and then into the initial vowel of eggs. The situation's quite similar in American 4 eggs. Almost as soon as the vowel of 4 begins, the formants start gliding into the r, and from there into the initial vowel of eggs. But when we come to the southern British 4 eggs, we begin with this relatively flat portion, which is the or vowel. It's only after this long vowel that we move into the additional r sound, which is inserted in England and Australia to keep apart the vowel of 4 and a following vowel, like in eggs. And now we can see how it is that English and Australian people say law and order, or I saw eggs on sale.
The restoration of law and order. Law and order.
Detecting crime within a particular state, maintaining law and order. Law and order.
Law and order is definitely one of those. Law and order.
In return for law and order and a chance to get rich.
To American ears, it seems like they're saying the wrong words, that they're mistakenly saying law and saw instead of law and saw. But actually, they aren't. The r isn't part of the word law or saw. It's an unconsciously added, inserted sound to keep law and saw separate from a following vowel. It's exactly the same r that they unconsciously insert after 4 in 4 o'clock, or after saw in a sight for sore eyes. The fact is that languages don't really like adjacent vowels, something that's called hiatus. They'd much rather have vowels and consonants alternating. And the English and Australians are about as allergic to hiatus as you can get. Many of them would find it almost physically impossible to say banana-ish without that separating R. Most English accents have examples of avoiding hiatus or abutting vowels. One, of course, is the N that appears on the indefinite article before, say, the word hour, an hour. This is because hour begins with a vowel sound, and the N avoids the hiatus of a hour. We don't need the N if we put the indefinite article before, say, the word unit, which begins with a consonant sound, y. Note that spelling is totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter that H is a consonant letter or that U is a vowel letter. The words hour and unit begin phonetically with a vowel and a consonant, respectively. Similarly, it's totally irrelevant that 4 ends in a letter R and law doesn't. In my kind of English, they end phonetically in the exact same long vowel, or. And in my kind of English, that long vowel can be separated from a following vowel by inserting an extra additional r sound. I made a video about another phenomenon that prevents hiatus, and which has, I think, been getting more common over recent years. This is hard attack. Here the separating sound is not r, but a glottal stop, which gives 2 eggs, law and order.
Most penguins lay a clutch of 2 eggs. 2 eggs.
Traditional law and order. Law and order.
Of course, some accents are a bit more hiatus tolerant than others. General American speakers are happy saying law and order, and even banana-ish. And many South African speakers of English have even more hiatus than General American because they don't have either word final r or linking r, which means they can say 4 eggs, for instance, a sight for sore eyes, etc. Let me just end by returning to the dictionaries. When I point out the inaccuracies of their transcriptions, some people comment that these are broad transcriptions which don't have to be super accurate. Well, I can talk in a future video about the dangers of letting your symbols drift too far from reality. But I do think some teachers and learners and actors might like to know whether or not a given accent of English actually has distinctive vowel length. And regarding my type of accent, the most familiar symbols tell the world that these vowels form a group, and video after video and book after book and teacher after teacher disseminate this grouping. But it's a mistake. E and oo have no business being there. If more resources showed the glides that the relevant vowels end in, as some resources do,
Yippee!
people would never have dreamed up and taught non-existent phonetic objects like linking y and linking w.